Well, you're starting to hear commercials and see commercials involving the Democrat and Republican race for president here in central New York. And Professor Allan Saxe is on the line right now. What role are the independents going to be playing in this upcoming presidential race? Professor, good morning. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thank you very much. The one-word answer is a lot, and maybe more to come.
So, especially, I mean, you take a look at Trump, a lot of people that haven't voted before. Take a look at Bernie Sanders, a lot of people that haven't voted before.
A lot of Americans are fed up with both Democrats and Republicans. As a lot of people know, the Democratic Party, if you want, I'll use a strong word, rigged the primary in favor of Hillary Clinton, as everybody knows, by awarding her so many superdelegates. They didn't award her the superdelegates, but they knew these superdelegates pretty much were going to go with Hillary Clinton. And there's a lot of them. And if you take away the superdelegates, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders would almost be neck and neck in regard to delegates. On the Republican side, they're not so mad about the superdelegates, but they're mad about what happened with some of the caucuses. And what happened in Colorado just the other day is making a lot of Republicans furious. There was not a real primary vote. It was perfectly legitimate what the Republican Party did in Colorado, but it doesn't meet the test that a lot of people think that people ought to be participating in these primary selections of delegates. So everybody's mad.
I know everybody's mad, but isn't it, I mean, you have Trump coming out and saying this is supposed to be a democracy, and it's not. It really isn't. It's always been this way. It's the party selecting its candidate, and why should we be overly surprised on something that's been this way for a long, long time?
It is. We're not, and in fact, the whole country is not really a democracy. You're very right. It's a republic. The word democracy does not show up anywhere in the United States Constitution.
Right.
You make an interesting point, but we think we are in our sentiments, in our in our speeches. We always talk about the word democracy. I think this country, in many ways, is moving much more toward a democracy with a little d than ever before. But it may not be all good. So you raise some interesting philosophical and political points. But right now, I think it's driving the independent ranks a lot larger. The Democratic Party is falling in popularity, and so is the Republican Party. The Democratic Party, about 30% of the population, the Republican Party, about 26%, independents, the largest single group.
Well, and that's where independents can play the big role here. If they get out and vote, the problem comes in, though, and you tell me what you think, Professor, is that the Democrats at their 30-some-odd% and the Republicans at their 20-some-odd%, they have a little thing called the ground game. And somebody without a party, the independents, there's no ground game to get that vote out. So it has to be a ground swell. Which is better, the established ground game or just that popular groundswell?
Well, both the political parties are going to have to mobilize to get that independent vote.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing. That, I think, is Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, where they are pulling people into the political process and voting in these primaries who really have not been affiliated so much with the Democratic or Republican Party, and they're bringing them in. It's hard to know if they can hold them in the general election in November. But it's a very interesting system that we have today where the independents are really so strong and ever getting stronger.
I want to ask you one more question on this, and that would be more about the general. You know, we talk about the way this is set up. Basically, our forefathers, not just this hasn't happened over the years, but our forefathers didn't completely trust the public.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't trust the public. There's no question about that. The Electoral College in the original Constitution and the way it is today, when George Bush and Al Gore had that very famous election battle in the year 2000, a lot of people woke up and asked the question, you mean a person can become president with less than a majority of the popular vote? And, of course, the answer is certainly yes.
Yeah.
You know, and in the original Constitution, United States senators were not elected. They were appointed. They're elected today by constitutional amendment, but they were appointed in the original Constitution. And on and on and on. Federal judges appointed for life, not elected.
It's going to be very interesting, and you, of course, have a candidate out there that in Donald Trump that doesn't seem to It seems that Ted Cruz will kind of step back a bit because he's a constitutionalist, step back for the good of the country. I'm not sure Donald Trump is a guy that is going to, let's just say I don't think he's going to stop fanning the flames.
Ted Cruz has a great ground organization. He really does. He didn't do anything illegal in regard to Colorado.
Right.
But it looks bad. It looks bad. But he didn't do anything illegal. Our political parties are really private organizations for the most part. But I think Ted Cruz is going to be beaten up by this. He's already been beaten up by Donald Trump, who calls this a crooked system. It's not a crooked system. Donald is just the way it is.
Yeah.
But he's going to get a lot of political sympathy, I think, out of this.
Very interesting. Professor Allan Saxe, as always, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. There he goes. Andrew, you got to let them know. They got a hum on that line. Every time I talk to him, it must be the Professor Saxe, the House of Hum, because it's that buzz that it's every time we talk to him. Listen, coming up, the latest on Will Smith. The latest going on in New Orleans in the investigation. What do we know? There's a lot of rumor out there. Is there this connection with a police lieutenant that Will Smith had dinner with that just so happened to be involved in the death of the guy who's been charged with Will Smith's murder, the death of his father? Is there a connection? What are police saying? We have some audio on that coming up. Also, people who know Will Smith, we'll have them on the line coming up. And, of course, Ron Mosher, who really knew Will well and covered him like no one else has covered him, and you really could say that about anywhere in the country. Ron Mosher coming up in just a few minutes as well. We'll focus on Will Smith here as we move on here in the next 20 minutes or so on WIBX.